Chapter 1: The Line in the Sand. The world above us is loud, fragmented, and endlessly moving. We are accustomed to a reality divided by borders on maps, lines drawn in ink by governments long gone. But out in the red, silent heart of the Southern Hemisphere, there exists a physical barrier that defies the imagination. It is a solitary line of wire, mesh, and weathered timber, cutting through the shifting red dust, the scorched spinifex scrub, and the ancient, heavy heat of the desert. They call it the Great Wall of Australia, or more commonly, the Dingo Fence. Officially, it was conceived in the late 19th century, built from the sweat of early settlers who sought to protect the fertile sheep grazing lands of the southeast from the apex predator of the continent, the wild dingo. It stretches for over 3,400 miles, twisting through the states of Queensland, South Australia, and New South Wales. It is longer than the Great Wall of China, longer than the entire distance from London to New York. Yet, unlike those historical monuments, it stands in absolute isolation, cutting a lonely, unyielding path through some of the most inhospitable and uncharted terrain on Earth. To understand the architecture of this barrier is to understand the desperation of those who built it. In the harshest sectors, the fence is not merely chicken wire thrown between wooden posts. It stands up to 6 feet high, constructed from heavy-gauge galvanized steel mesh, buried deep into the shifting sands to prevent burrowing animals from undermining its foundation. In the areas crossing salt lakes and clay pans, the posts are made of treated iron bark or steel stars, designed to withstand intense corrosion and flash floods. Every single foot of this barrier represents an exhausting expenditure of human energy against an uncompromising climate. When you look at this structure stretching into the endless, shimmering horizon, a strange, heavy feeling settles into the mind. Why would a young nation, struggling to build its coastal cities and stabilize its economy, expend unimaginable wealth, labor, and human life to maintain a fragile wire fence across a barren wasteland? Why keep it continuously repaired, cleared, and heavily guarded for over a century, long after modern satellite surveillance and technology offered other solutions? Tonight, we leave the busy, noisy world behind. We let go of the day's burdens, the relentless ticking of the clock, and the weight of our daily responsibilities. We journey into the quiet, vast emptiness of the Australian outback. Close your eyes. Listen to the imaginary wind brushing against the taut wire, creating a faint, metallic hum that echoes across the dunes. Let your mind drift toward the edge of the unknown, where the map simply ends and the silence begins. Chapter 2: The Forbidden Zone. To truly understand the mystery of this border, one must grasp the sheer, terrifying scale of the geography it divides. The fence does not just separate farmland from wilderness, It effectively cuts an entire continent in two, drawing a line between the explored and the unmentionable. On one side lies the Australia of the modern world, the glittering coastal cities, the green valleys, the vineyards, the bustling highways, and the comfort of civilization. On the other side lies what early British cartographers simply labeled the unoccupied territory, leaving the center of their maps completely blank. It is a vast, silent expanse of millions of square miles where civilians are strictly forbidden to travel without special, rarely granted government permits. The laws surrounding this boundary are strangely severe, carrying an emotional weight that goes far beyond simple agricultural management. To leave a gate open along the line, to damage a single strand of wire, or to cross into the restricted zone without authorization carries penalties that resemble national security violations rather than simple trespassing fines. Heavy fines and imprisonment await those who wander too far past the signs. The restriction zones are categorized under various administrative titles: Aboriginal reserves, defense testing grounds, and environmental conservation sectors. While these titles appear logical on paper, their combined geography forms a massive, interlocking shield that prevents an authorized entry into the deep interior. In the mid-20th century, the British and Australian governments used areas just beyond these borders, such as Maralinga and Woomera, for atmospheric nuclear testing and rocket development. The extreme secrecy established during that era never truly dissolved. It merely shifted form, adapting to the modern age of classified airspace and restricted land usage. If you study satellite imagery of the continent, a curious pattern emerges that leaves tech-savvy observers perplexed. Certain sectors directly beyond the wall are consistently obscured, pixelated, or rendered in outdated, low-resolution formats, officially attributed to mapping errors or a lack of commercial interest. But those who have stood near the wire at twilight, looking out into the forbidden zone, describe a deep, unsettling stillness that feels almost artificial, as if a blanket has been laid over the earth. The air changes its density. The wind seems to die down precisely at the boundary line, refusing to carry dust across the wire. It is an old rule of human nature that fences are built for two reasons: to keep something out or to keep something in. When you look at the heavy reinforcement of the wire, the warning signs, and the absolute isolation of the land beyond, the mind begins to wonder if the story of the wild dog was simply the easiest explanation to give to a public that asks too many questions. Chapter 3: Echoes of Eromanga. Millions of years before humanity walked the earth, the center of Australia was not a sun-baked desert of red stone and dead wood. It was a massive, ancient inland ocean known to geologists as the Eromanga Sea. 4 eons, strange marine reptiles, prehistoric sharks, and massive aquatic organisms swam over what is now the dead heart of the outback. When the waters finally receded, Draining into the crust of the earth through unknown fissures, they left behind a strange, hollowed-out landscape, a fragile limestone topography full of massive, unexplored cavern systems, underground rivers, and gravitational anomalies that modern science has never fully mapped or understood. This geological legacy created the Great Artesian Basin, one of the largest underground freshwater reservoirs in the world, sitting directly beneath the arid surface of the interior. This massive aquifer holds enough water to fill the world's oceans several times over, locked away in layers of porous rock. In certain areas along the fence, natural artesian springs bubble up to the surface, creating dark, thermal mounds of water known as Mount Springs. These springs have remained active for hundreds of thousands of years, serving as isolated ecosystems that hold unique, prehistoric organisms found nowhere else on the planet. Some alternative researchers whisper that the route of the dingo fence was not chosen by farmers or pastoralists, but by early surveyors who realized something profound about the geology of the interior. The fence perfectly traces the ancient shoreline of this lost prehistoric sea. It acts as a perimeter around the dry seabed and the most unstable areas of the subterranean basin. Beneath the red sand lies a labyrinth of subterranean channels that run for thousands of miles, connecting deep aquifers that have never seen the light of the sun. In the remote mining town of Kubapidi, where residents live entirely underground in dugouts carved into the rock to escape the brutal surface heat, miners have reported hearing rhythmic, low-frequency vibrations coming from deep within the bedrock. These vibrations do not match the shifting of fault lines, the collapse of old shafts, or the movement of machinery. They are steady, pulsing, and cyclical, growing noticeably stronger and louder the closer one approaches the perimeter of the fence. The desert looks dead and dry on the surface, but beneath the dust, something ancient is breathing, vibrating at a frequency that speaks to the deepest, most primal parts of our subconscious mind. Chapter 4: The Lost Expeditions. In the mid-19th century, the interior of Australia was a complete blank space on Western maps, a mystery that pulled at the hearts of adventurers. A golden age of exploration began, with brave men setting out into the red centre to discover what lay within, hoping to find inland rivers or fertile plains. The most famous of these was Ludwig Leichhardt, a brilliant Prussian scientist and explorer who, in 1848, took a team of 7 men, along with horses, cattle, and extensive equipment, to cross the continent from east to west. They walked into the interior, past the line where the fence now stands, and simply vanished into the haze. Despite massive, well-funded search efforts spanning decades, not a single bone, a single metal button, or a single horseshoe was ever recovered. It was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed them whole. Another tragic chapter unfolded during the Burke and Wills expedition of 1860. While these explorers managed to cross the continent from south to north, their journey back through the interior turned into a nightmare of psychological decay and spatial disorientation. Their journals' records show that even when they were surrounded by water sources and indigenous trails, they became utterly incapable of navigating the landscape. Their compasses behaved erratically, and their perception of distance became severely distorted, leading to their eventual demise from starvation in a land that was actively supporting indigenous communities. The journals of other explorers who barely survived the interior paint a deeply surreal, almost terrifying picture of the land. They wrote of strange optical illusions that could not be explained by simple heat mirages, visions of shimmering glass cities on the horizon, magnetic anomalies that made compass needles spin in frantic, useless circles, and a sudden, oppressive silence that felt heavy and intelligent. These men spoke of losing their sense of time, where hours felt like days and the horizon never seemed to alter. Shortly after these mysterious disappearances and the disturbing reports brought back by the survivors, the colonial government began the monumental task of constructing the first interconnected dog fences, slowly but surely blocking off the exact coordinates where the early explorers had lost their bearings. The official history books maintain that this was done to organize pastoral lands for sheep. But the timing suggests a different truth. A containment grid was being established around an area deemed too unpredictable, too physically anomalous, for human expansion. Chapter 5. The Sky over the Outback. When darkness falls over the outback, the sky becomes something magnificent, vast, and intimidating. Away from the artificial glow of civilization, the atmosphere is perfectly clear, completely free of moisture, revealing the true density of the Milky Way in terrifying beauty. It is here, along the endless line of the fence, that the sky begins to behave strangely, as if the border extends upward into space. 4 generations, travelers, indigenous guides, and station hands have witnessed the phenomenon known as the minute lights. These are not static stars, shooting meteors, or satellites passing overhead. They are distinct, glowing orbs of vibrant light that rise directly from the desert floor, hovering just above the scrub. The historical records of these lights date back far before the arrival of motorized transport or electricity. Early cattle drovers riding the night line spoke of being followed by single, pale blue orbs that kept pace with their horses for hours. The lights did not illuminate the ground beneath them. They held their own self-contained luminescence, casting no shadows on the surrounding scrub. When drivers attempted to follow the lights, they found themselves drawn deep into dangerous clay pans or rocky ridges, losing all sense of direction. The lights seem to possess a strange, unnerving intelligence that defies the laws of physics. They bounce, they change colors from soft yellow to brilliant blue and crimson. They mimic the movements of onlookers, and if you attempt to approach them in a vehicle, they retreat into the darkness at impossible speeds, maintaining a perfect distance. Mainstream science suggests these lights are merely pockets of piezoelectric gases escaping from underground mineral deposits, or perhaps the bioluminescence of undiscovered insects. Yet, those who live and work near the border notice a specific, unyielding pattern. The minute lights appear with the highest frequency directly along the perimeter of the fence, like silent, glowing sentinels patrolling a boundary line. They move back and forth along the wire, watching the empty space, ensuring that the division between our organized world and the deep, silent mysteries of the interior remains completely unbroken throughout the night. Chapter 6. The Megafauna Myth. In the ancient folklore and rich oral histories of the indigenous peoples, the land is not a passive backdrop of rock and sand, but a living record of the dreamtime. Their stories, passed down through song lines for tens of thousands of years, speak of creatures that belong to an older, larger world, massive, terrifying beasts that occupied the deep lakes and ancient plains long before European arrival. They spoke of the bunyip hiding in deep, permanent waters, of giant monitor lizards twice the size of a man, and of massive shadows that move silently through the midnight scrub, faster than any horse. Mainstream zoology insists that Australia's unique megafauna went extinct at least 40,000 years ago due to rapid climate shifts and early human hunting. Consider the Diprotodon, a marsupial the size of a rhinoceros, or the Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, an apex predator with bone-crushing jaws. While official science relegates these creatures to the fossil record, rock art found in isolated rock shelters deep within the restricted zones depicts these exact animals alongside human figures, rendered with precise anatomical detail. The artists who drew them were not working from imagination. They were drawing what they saw outside their caves. But the outback is vast beyond human comprehension, an ocean of land where time stands still. It is a place where an entire forest, a hidden valley, or an oasis could exist for centuries without a single modern human ever setting foot inside it. Cryptozoologists have long theorized that beyond the fence, within the strictly monitored restricted zones, these ancient evolutionary lines never actually died out. Safe from the destruction of agriculture, industrial hunting, and urban sprawl, the prehistoric biology of the continent may have found a permanent, government-protected sanctuary. The fence, under this light, becomes a safety barrier of an entirely different kind. A protective wall built not to save sheep from wild dogs, but to protect modern civilization from an older, wilder, and much more formidable ecosystem that we are simply not prepared to acknowledge, understand, or manage. Chapter 7: The Pine Gap Connection. Deep within the restricted territory of the Red Center, hidden away amidst the rocky ridges of the McDonnell Ranges, lies a place called Pine Gap. Officially designated as a Joint Defence Space Research Facility managed by the Australian and United States governments, it is one of the most heavily guarded and secretive military installations on the planet. Massive, white satellite radomes rise unexpectedly from the red desert floor like alien monuments, their faces pointed perpetually at the cold stars. The location of Pine Gap was chosen with deliberate, mathematical precision. It sits almost exactly at the geographic center of the continent, far removed from any ocean or international border, making physical espionage nearly impossible. The facility operates under a cloud of absolute sovereignty. Even members of the Australian Parliament have historically been denied full access to its subterranean operational rooms, raising deep questions about who truly commands the facility. While the public is told that Pine Gap is merely a surveillance hub for satellite communication and defense telemetry, whistleblowers and independent researchers have long claimed that the facility's primary focus is directed downward, into the very core of the Earth. They speak of an immense underground complex extending miles into the bedrock, powered by its own hidden energy sources, designed to map and utilize the unique electromagnetic grid lines of the Australian continent. Interestingly, the path of the dingo fence creates a massive, multi-layered geographic buffer zone around this entire region. It keeps the public, independent surveyors, and curious travelers hundreds of miles away from the perimeter of these installations. The simple wire fence provides the perfect low-tech cover for a high-tech empire of secrecy, ensuring that whatever energy, frequencies, or technology are being tested in the dead heart of the continent remain entirely unseen, unquestioned, and buried in silence. Chapter 8: The Great Containment Paradox. To understand how a government might use a civilian crisis to mask a military or territorial containment effort, one only has to look back at the bizarre historical event known as the Emu War of 1932. Following the Great Depression, thousands of massive, flightless emus migrated into the agricultural lands of Western Australia, destroying crops and breaking fences. In response, the Australian military deployed soldiers armed with Lewis machine guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition to eradicate the birds. The campaign was a spectacular failure. The emus exhibited highly advanced tactical behavior, splitting into small groups, dodging gunfire, and rendering the military's heavy weaponry completely ineffective. The media treated the event as a comedy, a joke about soldiers losing a war to birds. But looking closer at the historical record, it marks the first time a modern military force was officially deployed within domestic borders to combat a biological disruption. The strategy failed, and the government realized that mobile military force could not control the vast, unpredictable wildlife of the interior. They needed a static solution. They needed an absolute, permanent physical barrier. Shortly after the failure of direct military intervention, funding for regional fences exploded. The state borders were reinforced with thousands of miles of wire, creating a permanent containment network across the country. The official narrative remained focused on agricultural protection, but the infrastructure itself points to a systematic effort to partition the continent, isolating the coastal populations from the unpredictable movements of the deep interior. The sheer logistics of maintaining this partition are staggering. The fence must be cleared of drifting sands that threaten to bury the wire, forming natural ramps that creatures could easily walk over. In the northern sectors, wild camels imported from Arabia in the 19th century regularly stampede against the perimeter, requiring heavy steel reinforcement lines. The fence is an ongoing, quiet war against nature, a war fought with shovels, wire strainers, and endless patience, hidden away from the sight of the coastal cities. Chapter 9: The Anatomy of Outback Madness. For over a century, those who have spent prolonged periods near the fence or within the deep interior have spoken of a specific psychological condition known colloquially as outback madness or the red delusion. It is not simple loneliness or cabin fever. It is a profound sensory shift that occurs when a person is exposed to the absolute silence and vast horizons of the Red Desert. Victims of this condition report that after several weeks, the silence stops feeling empty. It begins to feel dense, heavy, and auditory. People hear distant, rhythmic drumming that appears to emanate from the ground itself, rather than through the air. They report a sudden, intense aversion to looking toward the interior, an instinctive feeling of being watched by the horizon. Geophysicists have noted that the central crust of Australia contains some of the largest iron ore and magnetic mineral deposits on Earth, including massive formations like Mount Whaleback. These immense concentrations of metal create highly localized variations in the Earth's magnetic field, anomalies that can disrupt navigation equipment and alter human neurological activity. Prolonged exposure to these magnetic fluctuations, combined with a lack of visual landmarks, can induce mild altered states of consciousness, auditory distortions, and a complete loss of spatial awareness. The boundary riders who patrol the fence are heavily vetted for psychological stability before being assigned to the loneliest sectors. They are taught to focus strictly on the wire in front of them, to keep their eyes down, and never to let their minds wander out into the red haze of the restricted zone. Chapter 10: The Secret Highways. Beneath the dust and the spine effects, the interior holds another architectural riddle: the secret highways of the outback. During the Cold War, a series of dirt tracks and unpaved roads were constructed across the restricted zones, officially to assist with mineral exploration and regional surveying. The most famous of these is the Gun Barrel Highway, built by surveyor Len Beadle in the 1950s. These roads were constructed in perfectly straight lines for hundreds of miles, cutting through sand dunes and rocky plains without a single curve. While these roads appear abandoned on modern tourist maps, labeled as highly dangerous routes requiring specialized survival gear and multiple spare tires, regional travelers have noted that certain intersections are equipped with heavy steel gates, security cameras powered by solar arrays, and deep trenches cut across the dirt to prevent vehicles from turning off the main track. These hidden access points lead directly into the deepest sectors of the unoccupied territory, towards locations that do not exist on public maps. Heavy transport trucks, unmarked and covered in thick red dust, are occasionally seen entering these tracks under the cover of night, moving away from the coastal ports and disappearing into the dark heart of the continent. Who built these highways into the void? What assets are being transported into a desert where there are no cities, no ports, and no civilian populations? The infrastructure exists, silent and functional, a shadow network running parallel to the dingo fence, operating under its own laws and answering to an authority that remains entirely invisible to the outside world. Chapter 11: The Border Patrol. The fence is not left to the whims of nature or the mercy of the elements. It requires constant, relentless maintenance to survive the harsh desert winds, the shifting sands, and the corrosive salt flats. A dedicated group of workers known as boundary riders patrol sections of the thousands of miles of wire every single day. They live in extreme isolation, spending weeks alone, traveling in specialized vehicles along the narrow dirt tracks that run parallel to the fence, repairing breaks, clearing fallen timber, and monitoring the perimeters for any signs of disturbance. But the old-timers who have spent decades working the line tell stories late at night that never find their way into official maintenance logs or government reports. They speak of encountering sections of heavy, high-tensile wire that have been violently torn apart from the inside, not chewed through by wild animals, but twisted, stretched, and snapped by an immense physical force that no wild dog or known land creature could ever exert. They talk about the sudden, irrational dread that occasionally overcomes their horses or tracking dogs when approaching specific, nameless sectors of the wall, places where the animals refuse to move forward, where the air suddenly feels heavy with static electricity, where the temperature drops rapidly despite the blistering desert heat, and where the silence becomes so loud it rings in the ears. The boundary riders understand that their job is critical to the nation's economy, but the wisest among them have learned not to look too deeply into the dark beyond the wire, and never to ask what they are truly keeping at bay. Chapter 12: The Dreamtime Matrix. To fully comprehend the depth of the Australian interior, one must look beyond Western science and explore the indigenous concept of songlines, or the yuging. To the traditional keepers of the land, the continent is crossed by an intricate network of invisible pathways created by ancestral beings during the dream time. By singing the traditional verses of these songs in the correct sequence, a traveler can navigate thousands of miles across the trackless desert, locating hidden waterholes, rock shelters, and safe passages with absolute precision. The song is the map. Interestingly, several of the most sacred and restricted songlines run directly parallel to the path of the dingo fence. Elders have noted that the physical introduction of the steel wire and iron posts disrupted the energetic flow of these ancient pathways, creating localized areas of spiritual and physical stagnation. They view the fence not as a simple tool of agriculture, but as a deliberate attempt by the colonial government to sever the sacred connections between the tribes and the deeper secrets of the interior. In the indigenous worldview, the center of the continent is not an empty wasteland. It is the source of all life, a living powerhouse of spiritual energy that must be respected and protected through continuous ritual and song. By sealing off the heart of the land behind military zones and wire barriers, modern civilization has created a disconnect, a wall between our world and the primordial forces that shape the earth. The stories warn that if these paths are forgotten entirely, the balance of the land will shatter, and the ancient entities resting in the deep caverns will awaken, reclaiming the continent from those who live on its edges. Chapter 13. The Illusion of the Edge. We live in an era of absolute certainty, an age where darkness has been banished by electricity. We look at our smartphones, our satellite maps, and our global positioning systems, and we comfort ourselves with the belief that humanity has fully conquered, tamed, and categorized every square inch of the earth. But the existence of the Great Fence is a quiet, enduring reminder that our modern civilization occupies only a thin, fragile fraction of this planet. We live on the edges, on the safe coastlines, while the interior remains a vast, sovereign kingdom of silence, heat, and ancient memory. Beyond that simple wire barrier lies a true twilight zone, a place where the rigid rules of the modern world cease to function, where time slows down to a crawl, and where the earth still retains its primordial power. The fence serves a psychological purpose as much as a physical one. It creates an illusion of an edge, a clear, comforting boundary between the known and the unknown, the safe and the dangerous. By keeping us out, it preserves the necessary magic of mystery that humanity has lost elsewhere. It allows the earth to hold its breath and keep its secrets safe from the relentless, destructive noise of progress. As you lie here tonight, safe, warm, and entirely protected in your bed, you can appreciate the profound beauty of that mystery. You do not need to solve the riddles of the desert tonight. You only need to know that the boundary is secure and that you are far away from the lonely wind of the outback. Chapter 14. The Sleep of the Outback. The desert is finally sinking into the deep, restorative quiet of midnight. The intense, oppressive heat of the daytime red sand has completely vanished, replaced by the cool, refreshing air of the wilderness under a blanket of infinite stars. The fence stands perfectly silent in the dark, a long, silver thread cutting through the vast darkness of the continent, keeping the ancient mysteries of the world exactly where they belong, undisturbed by human hands. You have traveled to the very edge of the known world, to the final frontier of human knowledge, and now the journey is complete. It is time to return to yourself, to the quiet, peaceful sanctuary of your own mind. Let the thoughts of walls, deserts, secret installations, and hidden histories fade away like a shimmering heat mirage on a distant highway. Let your breathing become perfectly slow, steady, and deep, matching the slow, ancient rhythm of the sleeping land beneath the stars. There are no more answers to look for tonight, no more secrets to uncover, no more problems to solve. There is only peace, absolute and unbroken. The world is wide, the mysteries are safely guarded by the wire, and you are entirely free to let go of the day. Sink down into the darkness of your pillow. Let the absolute stillness of the outback take you into its arms. Sleep now. Sleep